commercial relationship with her partners in Europe has taken a serious turn for the worse. Other common market governments have pushed through farm price rises without Britain's consent. In spite of warnings that they were destroying the community's system of consensus politics, the European farm ministers meeting in Brussels bulldozed through a package of measures which mean an average 10.5% increase in farm prices. Their action comes the day after the community gave only half-hearted and short-term backing to sanctions against Argentina. And it breaks the traditions established by France in 1966 that there should be unanimity in matters where vital national interests are involved, the so-called Luxembourg Compromise. Britain's Agriculture Minister, Mr. Peter Walker, accused the other governments of steamrollering the price rises through and claimed the vote violated the conditions under which Britain had joined the EEC in 1973. In the Commons, the Prime Minister reacted angrily to the idea of the measures being enacted by simple majority.
If that is so, then this is quite without precedent. It raises very serious issues, and we should be considering what to do under the new circumstances. I don't think it would be wise to go any further than that at the moment. It may still be possible to pull it back.
After the disappointment of the lack of wholehearted support on the Falklands, today's decision is a body blow to Britain's position in Europe. Even phlegmatic and experienced British officials make little secret of their anger and dismay. And what makes it worse is that even though the rules that have been followed over the past 16 years have been flouted, under the Treaty of Rome, there's nothing the British government can do about it. This majority verdict seems to be legally correct, and this record increase in farm prices will come into effect later this month, even though Britain, Greece and Denmark objected. This move had been on the cards for some time, although on Monday Mrs. Thatcher appeared to have friendly and fruitful talks with the French President, Monsieur Mitterrand. Behind the scenes, his officials were working with their opposite numbers in other countries to see that Britain would no longer be able to hold up the farm prices. Chancellor Schmidt and the West German government also decided to move against Britain, despite what were seen as better relations between the two countries. The Germans, too, thought it was unfair of Mrs. Thatcher to exercise a veto on farm prices as part of the tactics to get a fair deal on the still unresolved problem of our contributions to the common market budget. The Irish, too, and their Prime Minister, Mr. Charles Haughey, argued that Britain was using unfair tactics. Irish farmers have a strong lobby, as do those in Holland and Italy, the other countries who lined up with the majority. But what also particularly angered the British were the activities of the President of the Commission, Monsieur Gaston Thorn. The Commission is essentially made up of civil servants, whose job it is to try to keep the community united and to see that the rules are obeyed. But on this occasion, the Commission openly came out against Britain. It was the agricultural ministers, though, who actually took the decision, and it was Mr. Peter Walker who had to deal on Britain's behalf with what was an extremely acrimonious meeting. But afterwards, his reaction was measured.
Well, it's a very serious move because for 16 years the community has had a formal procedure which every country has abided by, which states that if a country declares a national interest, other countries can't vote by majority vote to impose something against that national interest. Today, for the first time in 16 years, that was violated. I think it's a mistake. I think it now creates quite a serious situation in the community, one which will have to be very carefully considered and quick action taken upon it.
You referred to this as a steamrolling operation. Does this mean that from now on you and all your colleagues in the British government can be steamrolled by other members of the community?
Well, it's not just a British government. If you decide that you will have majority voting, which 16 years ago the community decided they wouldn't have if national interest was at stake, well, then it does mean any countries, small countries like Denmark, Greece, Italy, people like this, can then have a motion passed by the majority imposing something totally against their national interest. Now, that can't be the way to obtain cohesion and collaboration in a community. And it's very interesting today, having violated it today, the Italian and the French ministers immediately said they wish to go back to the old principles, having had their violation today. Now, of course, that is no practice, no method to adopt in a community such as ours. And I think, therefore, urgent action is taken to see that the principle of being able to protect your own national interest is enshrined quite permanently so that it can never again be avoided in the community.
In 1965, when the issue first came up, the French adopted what was called the tactic of the empty chair. For 6 months, they persistently boycotted the meetings of the community. and this paralysed all activities and led the others eventually to agree on what was called the Luxembourg Compromise. And this is one of the options open to the British government. There's also talk of us stopping payments from VAT to the common market budget. These run at the moment to about £1.5 billion a year. But these tough tactics might sour relations when support is needed on the Falklands, and the government is still very anxious to get a solution to the common market budget problem. So it's possible that if there was a solution to the budget problem, this crisis might be diffused. But a fundamental question would still remain. How will the common market in future decide on what should be done after today's decision?
The cost to the consumer of today's decision is hard to calculate precisely, but the government says it should put up prices by about 1.5 pence in the pound. But consumer organisations in Europe say it's more than that, and claim that over the coming months, butter could go up by about 10 pence a pound, cheese by about 7 pence, sugar by about 1.5 pence, milk by nearly a penny a pint, and bread by about a penny a loaf. The average family's food spending could rise by a total of about £1.30 a week. Labour Shadow Chancellor Mr Peter Shaw said tonight that the decision on farm prices was the most serious development since Britain joined the common market. Britain's relations with Europe were now in a state of manifest crisis, he said. Two Roman Catholic archbishops, Archbishop Derek Warlock of Liverpool and Archbishop